which is very clear when it comes to making Zoom events, but we're on the right track now, thank God. And I'd just like to welcome you to our wonderful Irish Women in Music panel. We have just such esteemed guests today, and I'm more than honoured to be hosting all of them. I'm massive fan, so I'm going to try keep it cool and ask questions, and I'll fangirl at the end. As much as possible. We have the wonderful Roisin O, Aine, Eve Bell, Fee, and then our wonderful academic, Dr. Anne Marie Hanlon, or Annie. And I'm very excited to be talking to them all about music, feminism, and the intersection between the two, which are my two favourite things and all of our favourite things apparently. So I think this is going to be a really, really cool event. Just before we get started, I would just like to say that we're going to go about 10 minutes over time because of the delay, and I hope that's okay with everyone. And also, if you have any questions for any of our panelists, we will make sure to get to them in the last 10-15 minutes. And you can pop them in the questions box, pop them in the chat, or you can DM myself or Breed or the Hist. Probably questions box is the best idea. Make sure you get them. But just before we get started with any of my wonderful questions, hopefully wonderful, I'm just going to give an opportunity to each panelist to kind of introduce themselves, explain who they are, just in case you don't know, even though you should know, and what they've done in their career so far. And yeah, I think I can hand it over to, I can see Eve first. So Eve, do you want to get started just explaining who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Eve. Eve Bell is the stage name, it's not my name. And I am a musician and a singer-songwriter. I'm from Donegal originally. I've been based in Dublin for the last 5 years. Just kind of working away on my music, working on a couple of different projects, and yeah, that's kind of who I am, what I'm doing. Yeah.
Wonderful. How about Aine? Could you introduce yourself?
Is that me?
That is you. Sorry, Amy.
Amy, yeah. I actually prefer the way you're saying my name. It actually sounds way fancier, so I'll take it.
It's all my French lessons. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. Hi guys, my name's Amy. I'm also a singer-songwriter. I'm from and still based in Dublin. I've been writing music my whole life and have just recently released my first EP, Confession. Unfortunately, it was the same weekend that we all went into lockdown, so timing couldn't have been better. But yeah, I'm just doing what all of us women here are doing, is just trying to do as much as we can online, because obviously shows and stuff aren't happening at the moment, and just writing loads of music. And yeah, I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you for joining us, and I'm obsessed with your setup. It's very vibey, very
thanks.
And how about Roisin O?
Hi, I'm Roisin O. I'm also from Dublin, up the Dubs. I have been singing and performing, my whole life. I released my first album in 2012 and been gigging and touring since then. I started a band called Thanks Brother in 2018 and have been gigging and touring with them for the last while. We just released an EP there last year. And through lockdown, I suppose I've been getting a lot more into my solo stuff and writing again for myself. So I am going to be doing more Roisin O stuff in 2021. Got some stuff in the pipeline, so really excited about that. And have some gigs with Thanks Brother coming up. We're announcing another show today in the Button Factory. And Thanks Brother is sort of an amalgamation of Roisin O and my writing partner John Bro, who is in a band called Miracle Bell. And yeah, it's lots of fun. So everybody should come to our gigs when we have them.
Absolutely. And I'm obsessed with your first album, The Secret Life of Blue, and everyone should go stream that, and all of your new stuff as well. But that particular album, I remember listening to it back in the day. It came out in 2012, so I was 12.
Nice.
And I thought you were iconic. Yeah, I think you're iconic back in the day, and I think you're iconic still. So, so could we have Fee now? We had some technical issues with sound, but I think we're all good now.
No, I'm so sorry about that. I don't know whether it was my laptop or sound or whatever. Yeah, so I'm Fee. I'm from Mullingar. I was living in Dublin up until lockdown and everything, so I'm back home now. I'm a pop artist, I guess, electro pop, and I've been doing it for the last properly, like, releasing singles for the last 4 years. So yeah, I've released 3 singles and another one coming out very soon. So just working away as everyone else here.
Wonderful. And finally, could we get Aine to introduce herself and what she does?
Hi, yeah, my name is Aine Hanlon and I'm a musicologist. So my job is basically, I'm an academic in music. So I basically study popular music and how it kind of connects with society. Kind of my main focus for the last couple of years has been on the intersection of music and social movements, especially feminism and queer rights in Ireland and in the United States. I suppose that's what, yeah. And so about 2 years ago, I got together with Signing the Feminists and organized the first a conference of theirs on women in popular music and folk music in Ireland, and it was an eye opener. But I think one of the reasons I got into this was because I think it was when Dolores, or one of the reasons I got really into this, I was already into it, but when Dolores O'Riordan passed away there, I decided that week, oh, I'm going to dedicate my next pop class to her, but just in tribute. And so I went looking and I discovered that there's not one academic book or paper written about her, and I was disgusted to think that one of our biggest icons is just not being studied. And it's just it's a problem overall in academia. Women are not being studied enough, their cultural contributions aren't being studied enough. So that's why that's brought me here today. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I'm a music lecturer at in the Department of Creative Arts, Media and Music in Dundalk Institute of Technology.
Wonderful. I completely agree with you there. That's kind of the aim of this panel, is to have a discussion about women's contribution to the arts and to culture and to music. And I think it's really important that we have those discussions, especially in lockdown, because potentially this is a time for everyone to get streamed as much as possible. And also after the Irish Women in Harmony initiative, which I think was so inspiring to me as both a listener and a composer and artist myself. I was like, this is going to change things, and I'm so glad. So that's kind of what inspired me to organize this panel, and I think that's what we are here to discuss today. But just before we get into any of the awesome feminism stuff, I think it's important that we learn a bit about our panelists. So I'd just like to start off with a kind of an introductory question. Could each panelist in turn explain what inspired them to go into music, particularly why you pursued an artist route, which is notoriously difficult to garner success and recognition in Ireland? What struggles were you faced with at the beginning of your career? Were your parents supportive? How long did it take to be noticed by a record label, etc.? And maybe Eve, could you take that question?
I guess in terms of what inspired me to go in this career direction, it's not even necessarily one thing that inspired me. It was never an option to not be doing music in some way, form, or manner, in terms of, I just always found it incredibly cathartic. It was how I dealt with problems. So anything that was going on in my life, it would end up being channeled into music, and that sort of gradually led to that being a career. And it was just I'm incredibly lucky and incredibly grateful that the things that go on in my head and somehow end up being turned into songs, people seem to enjoy. And I've been able to kind of make a bit of a career out of sharing that with people. My parents were very supportive, to answer that one. They are class, they're great. And in terms of the struggles, it's, I think now more than ever, it's really apparent that it is very, very difficult to be a musician in Ireland and have nothing else going on. It's very difficult to dedicate all of your time to music and have no side project or no backup plan. And that was always kind of the thing I was asked growing up, when people are like, oh, what do you want to do? What do you want to be on? I'm like, oh, musician, 100% musician. They're like, oh, cool, but what's your backup plan? Or what are you going to do if that doesn't work out? And I'm like, well, I don't really want to plan for if the main thing in my life doesn't work out. And that's kind of the assumption, is that you are eventually going to run out of steam and not be able to do it anymore. And it kind of takes a lot of mental strength to have a lot of conviction in yourself and in your work. And I think the conclusion I've come to that is that even if I end up having something else going on in the background or some other career, music is never going to be not what I'm doing, because it's just not an option for me. It's non-negotiable that it's always going to be the biggest part of my life, and everything else kind of comes second. So yeah, that's, I guess, I think that answered all of them. I'm not sure. Yeah, hopefully.
That's a great question. How about you, Fia? You're in music as well. What inspired you to go into music in the first place?
So it was me, yeah. Yeah, so for me, I just loved music growing up. Like, I used to buy karaoke machines every Christmas, and I just wanted to be a singer. I was just like Britney Spears, yeah. But knowing like I didn't come from a musical family or like had none of that background. So for me, I know I suffered with a lack of confidence for most of my teenage years. And then in my final year of school, I remember we did a retreat, and they asked us to put into the box what you want to be when you grow up. And I was 17 then. I remember putting in the singer, but I didn't even sing then. And so I think for me it was drive and determination and just being like, I'm going to do this. So I picked up a guitar and bought it at 18 and first year in college. So people might relate to that now. And I think it's never too late to start. So I picked it up, just taught myself, started writing songs, and it kind of just went from there, to be honest. I had no kind of, I guess my family just saw it as like a weird hobby, but like I just really, really loved it. And I think that's, if you love it, like you will do everything you can. And in terms of a backup, like Eve said, like, yeah, for me, I have a teaching degree, and I'm in business as well. So it's, I think balancing those two, and also like music is a massive passion for me, and it won't ever be something that I push aside. So I do balance, if that means not going to a friend's birthday or a wedding or whatever, like you do have to make those sacrifices, but you know, it's worth it in the end.
Yeah, I completely agree. Amy, would you also like to take this question?
Yeah, so I mean, I think we're all going to have very similar stories. For me, again, it was never I never really believed in what's your plan B type of thing, just because for me, I'm a very all or nothing type of person. So it's kind of like, if I give myself a plan B, I may as well not do the plan A, you know? I either have to go 110% in something, or I don't do it at all. I mean, I started off kind of putting myself out there, just doing covers, and that kind of just led to me kind of starting to build my own profile, and people kind of starting to know my name and things like that, just to be able to, for me to be able to get into the room with people, to be able to say, oh, I do online videos or whatever. But the problem with that was a lot of people didn't take me serious, and they were almost shocked then when they realized that I do write songs. And then, I mean, I feel so old, but there's so many different reasons why it kind of held me back. I also was in some bad situations with writing sessions with male producers that used to tell me that I wasn't very good at writing. So again, that was me thinking, oh, like I'm not very good at writing, I just won't do it. So for years and years, I wouldn't let anybody hear the songs I was writing. So when Universal then approached me, who is my label now, to meet with me, I was kind of reluctant to even show them the songs that I've written. And I was kind of like, yeah, I do write songs, but I don't know if they're any good, type of thing. And luckily they loved them. And it was kind of just little things like that that gave me more and more confidence. And I got a new team around me that was able to, they actually treated me well. And I didn't have men surrounding me telling me that I should just do what I was told, and I should just sing songs that are given to me and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of where I am now. So I'm absolutely loving the last 4 years. I've just been doing literally my own music and only releasing songs that I've written myself, which has been amazing and a real confidence booster. I think even at the start, when you said yourself, artist, I think we all have trouble saying that. And I do myself as well. It's that weird kind of imposter syndrome, like afraid to say I'm an artist. But I think that comes down again to just us women feeling like we don't want to sound too big for our boots, you know? So I think in future, when you say that, say it with a full stop at the end.
You're dead right, absolutely. And I think that's like 100% true for every artist that I know, and especially female artists, because it's almost, you know, it's accepted that men go into bands and it's like this cool thing, even in school and secondary school. But like, you always feel like when you say you want to be a pop singer, like Fee did, when you say you want to be Britney Spears, it feels like, oh wow, okay, like sure, go on. And you kind of get that reaction from everyone, I think, from a time you're very young. So that that's where like the imposter syndrome I think develops. And kind of just to develop on that question for you, Amy, so you just released your 5-track debut EP, Confession, which is iconic and so good. I think I've been like playing Don't Call Me Pretty just nonstop for the last like 3 weeks. It's such a good song, and I think everyone I've showed it to has been like, this is amazing, why have I not heard this before? And I'm like, that's a good question. Come to my panel. So I think your message is very much girl empowerment and love yourself. And I think that's really, really important to talk about. And I think I've seen you say in interviews before, it seems like this American Singers game, and yet you brought it into like the Irish scene. And I think that's really, really cool. And I was just wondering, how do you conceptualize those lyrical ideas? Do you do that first and then do you match the sound to that? What is that process like for you?
So my writing process, I always start with melody first. That's always been kind of my routine, I guess you'd say. So melodies always come to me first, but I never start a song without the title. The title's already done first. I don't know why, that's just always been my thing. And it's kind of like, if I don't know the title, I don't really know where I'm gonna go, even melody wise or storyline wise, because I just noticed years ago when I used to write, I just used to waste so much time kind of going around in circles going, what am I even saying? So I always just think it's a great idea to even have a concept in mind before you start. Like, in other words, just ask yourself, like, what's on your mind today? Like, what is it that I feel I want to say, or I feel like people will want to hear? So I normally start with melody, but the title's always in my head first before I start.
That's really interesting, actually. I think for myself, whenever I'm writing music, I write out loads of words that I think fit the aesthetic. So I think of like an aesthetic first. It's just interesting how it's different for every single person. Fia, who's at the end of this call, would you like to jump in on that? How you write music yourself? Is that Fia Fox? Would you like to jump in on that? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? I know everybody seems to have their own kind of way of doing things. I always start off with the melody as well. Well, I kind of like to start off with the chord progression. And then with the chord progression, I kind of play around with it a bit, see sort of how I'm feeling. And then, as Amy was saying as well, sort of think about what I want to say or what I want to write about. Because again, sometimes I do waste so much time. So I kind of get a chord progression, play around with melodies, sort of think about what I'm sort of want to say or what kind of the vibe of the song is, and yeah, go from there. I'm kind of completely opposite. The title for me sort of always comes last, but maybe I might use that in the future and maybe start with the title and see how it goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe like a word map or like a diagram for biology where you put like photosynthesis and then you like do loads of things, like start with the title and then do that. I don't know.
I just have notes on my phone, literally pages and pages and pages of notes of titles. So if I'm like walking through the supermarket and somebody says something in a conversation, I'm like, ooh, that was cool, straight into my notes.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea. Oh my gosh.
Conversations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And for Roisin, I think this next question is for you. I'd kind of like to talk to you about your live performances, especially in a time where those can't happen, because I think your music, for me anyway, I'm thinking of Warm Me of Silence particularly, and your whole first album, it really it transports me into a live setting. It feels like just big and energetic and booming, and I feel like ready to dance. So I'm just wondering, for you, and also you've had just an incredible set of live gigs that you've done. I was just wondering, when you write music, do you write with a band, with a live performance in mind when you're writing for your own name? And also, what has been your favorite gig over the last years of your career?
Yeah, I suppose the first album, it was very much so written in a rehearsal room with my band. With the first album, I had 3 players with me who were all co-writers on the album, and I toured with them. They were very much a part of that Roisin sound for that first album, because I was straight out of college, and I was sort of writing for the first time in my early 20s, very self-conscious, and I found this group of people that just brought out the best in me, and they were great musicians in their own right. So I never had that horrible moment of getting, like Amy, that sounds horrific, getting into a room with a producer when you're only starting on your musical career. To have to deal with that would have given me insane anxiety for the rest of my life. But I was lucky enough to work with 3 great musicians on that first album, and so that that acoustic folk sound really came through, mixed in with sort of pop elements. But as I grew away, I became more of a solo act. I got different players in with me and became more independent in my writing. And if anything, the music got even bigger and louder, like you're saying, Warm Me in Silence. That's like got this Florence and the Machine drum beat. It's very energetic. There's like, I almost wrote it in mind with like as if I could afford a Florence and the Machine band on a world tour, you know. And I didn't want to restrict myself by the band that was available to me, in terms of, realistically, after my first album, I couldn't afford a massive band to go on these tours of America with me. But I didn't want that to stop me from creating the sound I really wanted, which was this big, massive Florence-esque type sound. And so I went into the studio, not thinking about how I'm going to recreate this live. But because I didn't want that to hold me back from the sounds I really wanted. So I made it work live. It was difficult, but I had great players around me as well. I'm trying to think, what did you say? My favorite song, or my favorite gig.
Live performance. Sorry.
Yeah. One that pops up, I played the 3 Arena there recently with the RTE Concert Orchestra. I played with John from my band Thanks Brother, and we played 2 songs, and it was only 2 songs, but it was with an orchestra, and like they're playing my own music to this sold out 3 Arena crowd. It was sort of special. It was definitely special in terms of like epic gig. But then other times it's just like the last Whelan's show that I sold out, like, you know, it's Whelan's, it doesn't sound like that it's going to be that amazing, but sometimes those shows where the crowd are just with you for every moment are just as special as playing to a 3 Arena, you know.
Absolutely. My favorite gigs that I've gone to, and I've never had the pleasure of seeing you live, unfortunately, have been in Whelan's. I think there's something so intimate about that crowd. And I was thinking of it the other day, and I'm like, it's so unfortunate that feels like it's never going to get again, facilitate.
Don't say that.
You know, sorry. I was just like, I hope so. Especially during this time with like the mistletoe and the lights are up. It's really just a special space. But that sounds amazing. Playing with an orchestra is just, it's something completely different, I'm sure. I'm a big orchestra gal, so playing with singers as a part or a cog in the orchestra is very special. And I've only gotten to do that a few times. For you again, Roisin, I was just wondering, your cover of Grace is particularly special, and I think that it has done very, very well on your Spotify streaming wise. I was just wondering, considering we're talking about like the Irish music scene, there's like this Sean Notes element of everything, and there's this Sean Note and Notes element of that song, and I was just wondering, how do you think it's important that Irish musicians kind of introduce an element of Irish traditional music into their music, be that singing Oscuelga, singing Sean Notes, using trad instruments? Do you think that's an important thing, and would you like to do that more in the future?
I think you know, if people are endeared, or if they love trad music and want to bring it into modern music, 100%, absolutely go for it. With trad music, like, I grew up around trad music. I love trad music, but I found it was something I was battling against in terms of the conceptions of what people thought my music was, because of the musical background I came from. So for especially the early years, I really battled against trying to get this name of Roisin. She's sort of this traddy Irish folk singer, you know. I sort of battled against that, so maybe didn't embrace those trad things. And I suppose as I've gotten older, I've even gotten more far away and incorporated more synths and less traditional sounding things. It's not. I suppose as I've gotten older as well, though, I sort of realized how much I love it. I love going into a trad session down in Dingle, I love singing with my family, who a lot of them are trad singers. But at the same time, like, when we got asked to do Grace, I was very wary of doing Grace, because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as this trad singer. But it was, when you come to a decision like that and you're getting asked to do something that you actually do love, and you're getting asked to do it for the centenary program with your brother and your cousin, and it's just, you know, it's going to be special, and you love the music, so you sort of, at that point, I have to say, well, what are the real reasons I'm thinking about saying no to this? It's not the right reasons to say no, you know. And I do love trad music, and it is sometimes hard to do both. It's hard to do both, that when I want really to do pop indie sounds, you know. So yeah, at the same time, I love it. I think if to say to anyone who wants to incorporate trad, 100% do it. I think that would be amazing if it's in your heart to go for it, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But if it's in something you like, absolutely, I think it's something you should include. This question is for Eve Bell. I've obviously admired Eve for years now, and I think there's like an interesting and really seductive like storytelling aspect to all of your songs. And I was just wondering if you could tell me your approach to writing Begging for Rain, which is your most recent single. Did you come up with a hook first and then move on to develop the rest of the song, or did you work from initial buzzwords and lyrics? How exactly did that process work for you? Because I'm just so interested in songwriting processes for artists like you guys.
Well, you know, like we've kind of been saying with songwriting, like everybody is so different. I'm very much a lyrics gal. I'm like really prioritize my lyrics in the songwriting process. I think, yeah, because that storytelling element is the most important thing for me. So Begging for Rain came from an amazing co-writing session I did over in London a couple of years ago. With an amazing writer called Nick Atkinson, who's just incredible, wonderful guy. But Begging for Rain, I kind of came in with this idea of this song I wanted to write in terms of like, I wanted to sort of vocalize like the frustration of like being stifled and not being able to speak what's in your mind, I guess, a little bit. That's kind of what it's about, but in a relationship context. So you're very much deliberate, causing problems on purpose because you can't deal with things adequately or communicate properly. And that's very much the song I wanted to write. And it did sort of fall into the lyrics taking priority and sort of leading the rest of the song. So what ultimately ended up happening was kind of coming in with this idea of like begging for rain, as in like trying to like tempt fate a little bit and trying to bring on an argument that you know is eventually coming, and just wanting everyone to sort of come out and say what's on their minds. But yeah, that was definitely the metaphor that I wanted to get across, and that ended up kind of leading everything else, and the melody sort of fell into place after that, once we had really kind of fleshed out that image and worked out what exactly that would look like across verses and choruses and everything. So yeah.
Wow, I love that idea. It's very like cinematic, this like, you know, please like thunder everything, make it all happen. I think that's, and it really comes across in the song as well. The chorus, like the hook is so, it like soars, it makes you like feel like you're flying for a second. It's really beautiful and powerful stuff. So I really like that song. I think it's really good, but my favorite is like Cutthroat. That will always be my favorite. It's just an iconic song. So this is a question for Fee. As I understand it, you began writing in your music when you were in college. You kind of did, as you said, you wanted to be a singer, but then never pursued it. But then in college, you began, writing with the guitar. And I was just wondering, how did you make that step into music, and how would you advise, like, what did you do the first, to break out, and how would you advise young songwriters to do the same thing, maybe if they started, in that same time period as you?
Yeah, I kind of found that I always loved English, and I think that combination of putting the two together just never occurred to me until I picked up guitar. So I think definitely probably having an instrument helps. And then what I used to do was, like, I think just refining and listening back and just listening to music and exposing what music you like as well, because I think, that's the music you want to make, so that's important too. And then for me, I just started doing like open mics, and I just drop in a song of my own and I wouldn't say anything. And then I remember at one of the open mics, and there was a couple there probably singing in front of 4 people, like, and one of them said that that was their favorite song, and I think that gave me just a little bit of a boost, and those little wins are really important at the start. And I wanted to be in a band at the time, but 2 actually fell through, so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do this on my own, and I started uploading SoundCloud at the time, which was bigger than Spotify before kind of Spotify took over. And I was just putting up kind of very simple tracks that I was kind of doing myself at home. And yeah, I was actually getting a bit of traction from producers. So it was about finding the people that you want to work with. So I just hit someone up from Dublin called Dennis Keelty, and then it kind of went from there. He kind of taught me a lot about the production and the business aspect and releasing a single. And I think that's really important, to have those connections to help you along, because you know, you don't have a clue when you're doing it from your room. So I think now there's probably a lot more exposure to that area, especially with things like this. So I think it's all about, you know, forming them connections, asking questions, and just learning along the way. It's basically trial and error.
I completely agree. And kind of developing from that, I think there's been a massive rise in bedroom pop, like being made in bedrooms. And I think that's due to a rise in, you know, improvements in technology. And I think it's actually quite wonderful to be part of a generation where anyone can create music. And so there's like a massive surge in the amount of people who are doing so. And I was just wondering, this is kind of for anyone on the panel who'd like to answer, how much involvement do you have in the production, and what, like, how do you do it? How do you like doing it? Is it something that you are heavily involved in with your music? Is it something that you really, you know, want a certain to do it a certain way? You know, you go back to mixers and you ask for something different. And I was just wondering, like, about your production process, if you're involved in it, for any of the singers.
Yeah, sorry.
You go ahead, Pete.
I'd be pretty heavily involved in production, and I think at the start I used to be like, oh, I don't want to say I don't like this part, or I don't, and now I'm just like, no, I don't, it's not up, like, and I'll bring in sounds from other maybe songs that I like and be like, can we do something like this? So I think that's having them references as well, so that producer understands, and the producer wants your song to be you to love it as well. So I think if it takes, you know, keep going at it until you're happy with it. I think that's really important advice if you're working with a producer. And say how you feel.
Absolutely. Roisin, would you also like to hop in there on that question?
Yeah, I think as I've worked more in music, I've become more of a producer. I wouldn't call myself a producer, because I think the producers I've worked with are so unbelievably amazing, and they have this whole other skill set that I don't have. But I do, in terms of production, you know what you like. You know, if you hear it, it's like, that's not what I'm trying to do here. And I think it's almost like a producer's job to say, okay, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And I'm like, no, it's that, you know. And as I'm an artist, and I would definitely raise my voice if there's anything I don't like in the production. But at the same time, if I was to produce another artist, I would never do as good a job as them. But I know how to produce my own art in a sense of what feels right and wrong. So yeah, but I'm getting better at production. I've learned Logic and I've learned Pro Tools, and trying to, like you say, in your bedroom, that's where you learn how to be a producer at times. You're not really learning how to do all that stuff when you're in studio with some massive producer who's doing it all. But I think it only helps your music if you're more involved with the production side of it, for sure.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think that's a really important aspect of developing an aesthetic and a vibe for your sound, the production of it. So I think it's important that people, you know, say what they want to say, and it's just to develop into the feminist part of this discussion. I think it's always difficult for a woman in a room full of men like Aine, potentially, if that's what happens to you within the music industry, to say, actually, I don't want this. Actually, you know, to be assertive, because, you know, we're classified as bossy instead of, you know, dominant and just saying what you want. And at this point, I'd like to ask Aine, your specialism lies within music theory, feminist theories of music and perspectives of music. What do you account for the lack of recognition of female artists in the Irish music industry? And could you explain why it's so imperative that listeners and record labels prioritise the promotion of female artists and push their music as much as possible? Could you answer that question?
Sure, yeah. I'm glad you gave me this question in advance because the answer to it is actually huge. So I made a few bullet points so I kind of distill some of the research down because it's there are literally books and books and books on this. I suppose I just wanted to start with, believe it or not, a quote from Virginia Woolf from 1928 when she was asked to give a talk about writing and what it's like to be a female writer. And she said, "All I can do was to offer you an opinion on one minor point. A woman must have money and a room of her own if she is to write fiction." And I think that time and space and money are actually the three biggest factors that impact women's ability to make music. And one of the reasons why women are so underrepresented is because women, because of gender inequality and its long history, and it's still having ramifications today. Even though we've been through multiple waves of feminism, we're still catching up, especially in Ireland, because when you think about it, in America they had their sexual revolution in the 60s, we had ours in the 90s. We're but now we're one of the world leaders in how we recognize gender and equality with regards to sexuality and things like that. So we are improving, but we haven't caught up in all aspects of our lives, and our cultural area is one of those. So one of the big problem with why there are less women is, and just to give you some figures, I think I was at a talk last year with Fair Play, that amazing group. They're doing great work on trying to bring gender equality to the music industry in Ireland, and they've discovered that between today 16 to 20% of recording artists are women. So it's still very, very low. We've never been anywhere near gender parity. And I'd say really up until the late 20th century, it would have been under 10%. So when you think about it, as women were growing up, firstly, they didn't have role models. So as in, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I know today, young women today, luckily have some fantastic role models, as some of them are on these, they're all on this panel, quite a few of them. And but the problem, I would highlight that in Ireland, in terms of history, one of the defining watershed moments for changing maybe the perception of women in pop music in Ireland would have been 1992, A Woman's Heart album. When that came out, this was the first time ever. Your mother's a legend, Roisin. So when this album came out, it just for the first, they dominated the charts for months and months and months. I recently, as part of my study in feminism, I was looking at kind of the interconnection between music and the abortion referendum in the early 90s, and it was just interesting that so this is the first time you see women really rising up and becoming serious forces to be reckoned with in the Irish pop music industry. So Sinead O'Connor was kind of the first star, and then it kind of, as in terms of pure pop, and then A Woman's Heart kind of made women really think, oh wow, look, women can be this successful, because even though they were there before, they weren't having the kind of major successes. They weren't the huge icons that the men were managing to become. And then also around that time, of course, Dolores O'Riordan came out as the front woman of the Cranberries, and she's one of our biggest success stories ever in Ireland. But unfortunately, that was kind of almost like an aberration in the history, and then it kind of went away. And then as in, women have never truly reached that kind of heights of success since. A Woman's Heart is still the #1 best-selling I think a single of all time in Ireland, as in nothing has ever paralleled that success that happened in the early 90s. And I think that some of the aspects that have held women back, in addition to role models and seeing women doing well, another reason is that there's a great book by Mavis Baton called Frock Rock, where she's a sociologist. She did studies of women in bands in the 80s and the 90s, and she kind of compared over the 2 decades to see, is anything improving for women? And she discovered that it was the same issues that continued on, and she kind of broke it down into 2 big areas that held women back. First was social constraints, and the second was material constraints. And so just the material constraints, of course, you got to remember, we still don't have equality of pay. Women are historically poor compared to men, and so are much less paid, don't have as much money. And we all know that starting music requires money. You need your money for your lessons, money for your instruments. And if you're not from a musical family, especially it can be very hard to first acquire those things. I know I borrowed a guitar. That's how I started. Luckily, my neighbor had given up, so I borrowed his guitar. And until I was totally proficient by the time I got my own instrument, you know. Same with piano. I would go to my neighbor's house. I wasn't allowed a piano of my own until I could play it. And then after like 4 years, I was allowed a piano, as in, and I had to be incredibly determined in my family, coming from a non-musical family, to be able to access music. And not everyone has that determination and you know, cheek to just spend half their lives in their neighbor's house to the point where their parents are embarrassed into buying them a piano eventually. As in, so another in terms of, so that's constraints. There's access to space and equipment. Quite often a band, as a youngster, you need to go to a place to rehearse. And women young girls are treated totally different to young guys. They're given a lot more freedom. You know, we need to protect women's fear of rape, fear of sexual assault is a lot stronger and at more the forefront of people's minds. Women need protecting. So therefore, women aren't allowed to just head off and do what they want in the same way that teenage boys can. And as a result, like, that means that even getting into bands can be a lot harder, unless it's you just have a very, very local setup and it's everybody knows everybody, you know, as in it's a lot harder for women to just even get into music. There's the family aspect. Then there's boyfriends and husbands. An awful lot of women are held back because of their personal relationships, and men not being too happy with seeing their other halves on stage. And this becomes especially prevalent. This Baton found in her study that an awful lot of women stopped performing professionally once they got married, and then it was, the drop off was even bigger when they had children. So having children is another aspect that has really held women back too. And if you just think of even, especially it depends on the genre you're working in. Certain genres are way more sexist than others, but think of like you know, Courtney Love, Kurt Cobain's wife, and how she was treated. I mean, the way they wrote about her, it was just like, she's a terrible mother. They never wrote about her music. They wrote about her motherhood and in a negative light. And it's always been very unequal how women and male musicians are treated. For example, in the 60s, Mick Jagger, we all know Mick Jagger, legendary, has had lots of women, but that doesn't matter. He's a stud. It's like what rock artists do. But women associated with him have been hurt by this, by the press coverage. For example, Marianne Faithfull was at a party with him in the 60s where rumor got out that a certain sexual act had happened, and it destroyed her music career, but not his. He's a legend. And then, you know, as in, there's just been double standards the whole way along. So that's social. And then the other problem, which has already been mentioned, is confidence, and that's always been a problem because male creativity is often more, unfortunately, it is just more highly respected than female creativity historically. As in, you see it like, you know, even if you go back to like, you know, Mahler the composer and his wife Alma, she was an incredible composer. She had to give up her career as soon as they got married. That's kind of, you know, and so he could do the thing. Another issue, once then, if you break through all those barriers, which fair play to you all have here, then you have to deal with public sexism, which is like objectification. Feminist theorists have been going on about the male gaze and its impact on how women are perceived now for decades, that women are unfortunately way more often judged on their physical appearance rather than their actual capabilities. And there's a mass, unfortunately, even men who consider themselves really enlightened suffer from an unconscious bias. In fact, women do too, and sexism, I think, is ingrained in a lot of women as well. So there's issues with regard to that. Also, ageism is a huge problem. Then if you have a successful career, and it's of course linked to looks and to do with the objectification of women, but women who age are not respected in the same way either. Think of someone like Sinead O'Connor. We all talk of Bono as an icon. Sinead O'Connor is not considered enough in terms of the public discourse as to how iconic she is and what she has done. And the biggest, really sad example of that is Dolores O'Riordan, and how it was like everyone had kind of forgotten about her, and then she died, and then everyone remembered what an icon she was. As in, whereas there's other icons that we never stop being reminded of, like, you know, there's Joe Dolan's got his statue, and, you know, it doesn't seem to be equally weighted, the level of respect given to women, especially as they age. And then there's also, just I suppose make a final point. There are more points, but these are just the kind of the most influential ones. There's also unconscious bias in listening. There was a really shocking finding about 2 or 3 years ago. Spotify broke down what people listen to according to the gender of the artist. And so they realized that men in their top 20 playlists, or the music they would listen to, there were no women in the majority of male playlists, whereas in women's ones, there would be maybe 5% upwards of women in their playlists. So it seems that there's like, well, certainly there isn't as much music out there made by women as men at the moment. It seems that like men are not as likely to want to listen to women as women are to want to listen to women. And that I can't explain. And that's something that needs to be looked at, definitely. But it just seems there's definitely an unconscious bias at work here with regards to how we judge our artists, how we listen to them, what we listen to. It's a really huge area, and there's still a huge amount of research to be done in it.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think you really laid it out very well there, the many ways that women experience inequality in this field, and I think those are very prevalent in Ireland, especially that problem of access to space, to equipment, to funds, to even just opportunities within the field. That's why we need labels and listeners to push the music of female artists. And then the kind of experience of being in the industry, I think, as a woman, because the language is completely different, the way that women who are artists, because then your opinion is then associated with your name, and women are called bossy and they're called promiscuous if they just have relationships. It's ridiculous, and it's a massive double standard that you outlined there, and I think that was really helpful. And I was just wondering if any other panelist would like to kind of discuss their experiences of the difficulties of breaking into the music industry, and then within the music industry yourself. I think Amy made a wonderful point earlier about being in a room full of men telling you what to do. Are there any other stories about like misogyny in that way within the music industry that you guys have experienced?
I just first of all, I just want to say to Annie, it was like listening to that was just unreal. Sorry, just want to say that. But I know, being a young woman and getting up on a stage in front of a room full of people in a society, in a country, where you're sort of designed and brought up with the idea that if you take up space or demand attention in any way, that is the last thing you are supposed to do as a girl. It's very much a thing that it's unseemly or whatever. But getting over that hurdle, as Annie was saying, getting over that hurdle and actually getting onto the stage, that is not even the hard part, because I know for me, I'm at a point in my life and in my career where I will just tell people to leave me alone, and that's great that I have gotten to that point, but it takes a while. And I'm 22, I'm still pretty young, but I've had experiences where I remember I was doing a gig down in Kerry a couple of years ago, and I was in the middle of playing my set. I was working, and a man just approached me, and I kind of assumed he was going to request a song. And I was like, okay, that's still kind of rude considering I'm in the middle of a set in this, but he asked me for my number, in the middle of a set, in the middle of a gig. And that's not unusual. The problem is, when I tell people that story, when I tell other female artists that story, it's never, oh my God, that's awful, what? It's always yeah, and then this thing happened to me, really similar. It's a universal experience that I think just across the board, people feel very entitled to women and their time and their energy. And I think when you're a musician, you sort of, when you're in the entertainment sector in any kind of capacity, you are sort of sharing a part of yourself with the world, and that really complicates putting up those boundaries and saying, actually, this is the part of me that I am sharing. This is the part of me that you are still do not have access to. And it really kind of blurs that distinction, and it does become difficult at times. When you're sort of still dealing with this sexism, it becomes really difficult to kind of get up there and kind of lay your soul bare, but then be around to tell and have the emotional whiplash of turning around and being get away from me, back off. It is difficult, and it's certainly a barrier for young women coming into this industry, because it is so prevalent. It is such a widespread problem that if you have one of those experiences in one of your early gigs, that could very, very possibly just scare you off the stage for years. And I think until we're talking openly about it and until we're condemning it openly and acknowledging that it is a huge problem, a huge issue, because I know when I came out and spoke about that particular experience, I had someone say to me, well, like, I hope you sat down with that man and explained to him that that was wrong. And that's another issue with it, is that if you speak about it very like openly condemning it, it's almost seen as if you are being unfair by not taking more time out of your day to explain to someone why their behavior is unacceptable. So that we have to jump through a lot of hoops. We have to be a lot of things to a lot of different people. And I think the bottom line should be that we should just be able to get up on a stage. We should just be able to go wherever we want and not be bothered by anyone. But yeah, I do think it is just an issue of losing control over boundaries. And I think that applies in all areas of life, just that people feel entitled to women and their time. And that is, until we address that, until we nip that in the bud, it's going to be really difficult for women to do well in any sector, in any career.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I would totally agree. And so many things, Annie, the things you're saying there is like, yes, everything. So on point. The thing you came to at the end by saying, well, why are we only listening to this men? Why are the men not listening to women? And I think it comes down to respect, and I found it in my own musical career, especially when I was young and just starting out. I would get on stage and sound engineers wouldn't talk directly to me. They talk to my guitarist, who's a male. They talk to my drummer. Yes. And I'm there. Sorry, I've actually been doing this for 5 years. I know what sound I want in my monitor. Like, can you just listen to me? And eventually I would start speaking in music speak in terms of set reverb or sounds or high end. And she knows what she's talking about. I'll listen to her now. Whereas not one of the men on that stage had to prove themselves before they got there to be heard. I've also found in other times, one thing about being a singer, I don't feel you get the respect as much as you do if you are up there playing an instrument. I go up there with my instrument and they're still asking my guitarist, oh, what's the story with your pedals? My guitarist has to say, sorry, they're Roisin's pedals. Maybe you should ask her. You know what I mean? And I was lucky enough, you're talking about seeing women who are doing the same thing as you. I grew up with a mother who was a very successful musician. So never in my mind was it something I couldn't do. And I was really, really lucky to have that. I never had to get over that hurdle of, oh, I can't do that, because I could always do that. And she constantly told me that I was a better singer than her, so getting that sort of ground level work of, yes, you can do this. And also going into her shows, seeing this woman who is an unbelievable singer, can't play an instrument, has no classical training, but tells every single one of those men what to do, and is an absolute boss, and seeing that and taking that in. And even though I had that, I still second guessed myself, because that was something I was so lucky to have, but I also was still talked down to because I was a woman, and I still wasn't listened to because I was a woman. So I had to take that and really actively work at, the same thing, worry about am I being bossy? And just saying, fuck it, you have to be bossy. Bossy, if the man was saying the same thing, he wouldn't be thought of as being bossy, because that's just the way you talk if you know what you're talking about. I
think that's why Sinead O'Connor wrote that song. I'm not bossy, I'm the boss.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what she was talking about.
100%. And even some stuff that we've been doing recently, something came up in Irish Women in Harmony, and one of the girls in the group was saying, oh, I keep asking for this one thing I want in the show I'm doing. And someone made the point, well, if Dermot Kennedy was doing that show and he asked for that, he wouldn't be second guessed in for a second. It's just that you're assumed that they can say, she doesn't really need it, or she doesn't really want it. Let's just try and make her not do this. It's.
Have you noticed in your careers that it's especially things to do with technology where you're sort of spoken down to?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But also even in singing, like, I'm asking for a sound out of my monitor. I'm the singer of a band, and you're still telling me that, oh no, you don't want that. if you get that, this will happen. No, I've actually been doing this for 5 years, and if you do this and this and this, it won't happen. So just do it, like, you know.
I think the last couple of months have been so eye-opening for, especially for us doing the Irish Women in Harmony project. Like I remember I was asked kind of at the start when the project had just come out, because I was also promoting a new single at the time, and the radio presenter had asked me, like, and have you met each other? Have you all like met up before? And at the time we hadn't. Obviously this was like in the middle of lockdown. And I said, but isn't that interesting that of all of the women, we've barely met each other? And the reason why, and this is like the perfect example, when anybody questions, surely women are picked the same as men, which is ridiculous that anybody would even say that. But the point being is, there is this, well, I felt it anyway in the music industry, that there is this almost kind of boys club type of thing with all the male musicians and artists. And the reason why that is because they're always booked for the festivals, they're always booked for these gigs, so they always cross paths. So they're all mates, and they all help each other out and ask each other to support their shows, and they've all met each other because they're all continuously booked for shows. But there'll probably only be one of us females on the list, if any. So
yeah,
of course we've never crossed paths before, because we're not all getting booked for the same things that all the guys are, you know.
100%.
So
And also to add to that, Aine,
all that out all the time, I feel, at the moment, especially with regard to gender lineups at festivals. Naming and shaming does seem to make a bit of a difference. Like, I know the Reading Festival 2-3 years ago were really publicly shamed. There wasn't one female, there was like 2 or 3 females on a massive lineup, and the next year it improved, the next year it improved, the next year it was shocking that again.
But see,
like
it's kind of an issue of like when you have an entire industry that sort of is built on this kind of sexist framework, it becomes really difficult to, because even on the level of casual sexism, as you were saying, Annie, like there are a lot of people who maybe unconsciously have this bias towards women, but when you have this entire network that's built on men supporting men, and like networks of men that have very few female members, and that does benefit male musicians, because as Aine was saying, they meet each other, they book each other, they help each other out. It is detrimental to that dynamic to allow women into those circles, because it stops the system that is currently working and that currently does benefit
but that goes back
men.
To why men tend to listen to men, you know, because it is almost considered, like a guy would be embarrassed to say, oh, I love Taylor Swift, you know, and she's like one of the most talented songwriters of this time. And she's so cheesy and she's so not cool because first of all, she's a feminist and she's very feminine. But guys will have no problem saying they love Billie Eilish, because Billie Eilish is comfortable and like proud enough to show, like, I don't even like saying this term, but her stronger side, or her more masculine side, let's say. And guys think, oh, well, that's cool, I can support that, that's cool. But any girl or woman that's in any way more feminine, it's considered not, it's almost like just not cool to show up to them shows, you know. So I totally agree.
And also continuing on what Aine was saying about the boys club and girls there only being one girl there, that also trickles down to women feel like I feel in the music industry, before I started with Women in Harmony, you're competing with the women in this space because there's such a small space for women.
Yeah.
I'm competing with 20 other women to get that one space on the festival, you know? So where instead, when I've really found this with Irish Women in Harmony, we have this WhatsApp group now, and the absolute, like, the leg up we give each other, the support we give each other, you know, this whole thing of women supporting women, it's so important, I think, going to be to the music industry as well, to give a leg up to the girl who doesn't have as big as a career of you, to retweet when they have a new single. These little things that women have to get out of their head. Well, oh, they're my competition, I don't want to do that because I have to think about my own career. You know, you can't be like that. If we want change, we really have to help each other to do it as well, and see each other on the same team. And I know what you mean about the boys club, but like they'd be worried that we would get in and take over that space. But I think there's so many men who want to help as well, but they don't know us because we're not there, you know. So yeah, it's all interlinked.
I was in an interview a while ago actually, and I think it was over a year and a half ago. I had done a single with Mark McCabe and OVA, so I was the only female on the project, and I was in an interview with a newspaper. And first of all, when the guy came in the room to interview us, I was the only one in the room. He didn't shake my hand, and he sat down and kind of had his shoulder to me, and so that kind of straight away I was kind of like, this is a bit weird, and was having banter with the lads, and I was kind of like trying to make eye contact with them, in other words, to say like, you know, say something, but they didn't realize. So the interview went on, and he asked them about the song that I wrote, by the way. He asked them about the song and asked them inspiration behind it, and then he turned around to me and asked me, and what who's your fashion inspirations, who is it in the industry you like to dress like? And I just was just like,
what did you say?
Sat in silence.
It's really the 1970s.
And I sat in silence for a split second, and I said, I don't dress like anybody. I said, but I mean, I really enjoyed writing the song and trying to.
Yes, Amy.
But after the interview, I had to almost say to the guys, I was like, that was your place to speak up. And
actually, she wrote it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they were kind of like, Jesus, so sorry, like, don't worry about it, I'm sure. And then the interview came out and I was a side note, you know?
Yeah.
So at the same time, I do know that we don't need to be, I don't think we are in any way saying men need to do more, but they need to do more. It's simple, you know? They need to do more. And it's not, I think even, especially when the Gender Disparity Report came out, it was quite disappointing seeing who did and didn't share it and who did and didn't acknowledge it, you know? So that was kind of a big eye-opener as well. But yeah, they just need to do more.
And do you find that when you do speak up and say, well, actually, you know, I wrote that are you looked upon going, oh, look, she's looking all this, you know, that it's kind of like a big
difficult.
In the last year, I feel like I don't know whether I've just gotten angry, but I've changed. Like at that time, I would have just kind of said it and kind of swallowed it and walked on. But now I don't care if they think I'm a diva. I don't care. Like I really don't, you know? Yeah. And I think all of us women need to get to that stage, because us being afraid and being embarrassed for what the men think is setting us back. So we need to just get over it, you know?
It's kind of funny. I'm just putting this out there, but I actually was in a session 2 weeks ago. Well, it wasn't really a session. I was in with a producer recording a song that I had sent across, but basically someone come into the studio and they listened to it. They didn't know me, they knew the producer, listened to the song, and then it was over, and this guy turned around to the producer and goes, oh, that's really good. And then he just said, oh, you wrote this today. And the producer said, no, actually, Faya come in with it. And the guy just automatically turned around and goes, and did you write that all?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, kind of like, you know, it was just his reaction, just automatic reaction. And did you write that?
Wow.
It's like interesting the kind of like, I don't know, even in interviews and stuff like that, like Amy was saying, like, I do think we just need to address the way that like women are spoken to and the questions that we are asked in those settings. Like I remember one time, and it was like a perfectly lovely interview, but I did call him on it because he asked me not that much about like the song, but he asked me, did I feel pressure to be a role model to other women, and like how like that, you know, like he gave Dua Lipa as an example, and he was like, oh, you know, these musicians are increasingly sexualized, and like, what do you think of that? Like, are they good role models? And I was like, I think they're great musicians and they're great role models for people who want to be musicians. So like, why does a woman have to be a role model? Why does a woman have to be anything? And like this idea that like we're very much like, and again, like with the like what's your fashion inspiration and stuff like that, like you're seen as like, you're almost like your appearance and your opinion on how you can be marketed to other people, like that's the most interesting thing you have to offer, and you can't possibly have any insights about the technical process of songwriting or like the creative side of it. And I think like we kind of brush it off a lot, and then I'm sure it is inadvertent in a lot of cases, but like sometimes you have to be like, no, that's an inappropriate question, and we're going to talk about why it's an inappropriate question. And like you know, we need to be able to do that without being painted as like bossy or problematic or like fussy or whatever. It's like, no, like I came here to talk about my music and we're going to talk about that. And this is a space that you've created for that specific purpose. And it's not wrong to reclaim that space for that purpose if it's being kind of distorted, you know?
I think that's so true. And I think what we've seen from both Annie's explanation of all of this kind of behavior academically and then all of your stories is that men are actually afraid of hyper femininity, and they're afraid of pop music. They're afraid of powerful women. It's like they can't fathom it, and so they have to ask questions that are demeaning, because that seems like that's the big thing, because they can't possibly have a woman who like cares about her appearance or cares about, you know, or, you know, is in pop music, which is attached to like you know, an image, and also is really involved in like the technical and creative aspects of music, and they can't fathom those two things, that they coexist.
And it seems that fundamentally too, there's not an equal valuing yet of male and female creativity. It still hasn't occurred. Yeah, and also I think there's a problem with not just hearing gender, but seeing gender as well, in how you guys have all been treated. And I think I just think it's interesting that I don't know, it's a pity you can't do it in pop music, but in the classical music world a few years ago, they brought in blind auditions for the orchestras, you know, where they put up a screen and you didn't know if it was a man or woman playing behind the screen. And that's why orchestras are more women today than men now, because they introduced that. But prior to that, I mean, there was a genuine belief that women weren't capable, you know, and yeah, they literally needed a screen to hear and capability, which is very sad. And it seems that, I don't know, some kind of major shift like that is still required in the popular music world.
I also I like when we talk about men, I do feel that not all men are the same way, or not all women are the same, and they're such great men in my life who are so supportive and have really helped me in my career. But at the same time, I do feel for the men who do ask those questions. I almost feel like it's been so ingrained in their upbringing as men that they don't realize that they're being disrespectful by saying these things. It just doesn't come to them. Like with Amy's conversation, they didn't realize that they should maybe step in and say that, because they have never been treated that way, you know, so it doesn't come to their mind. So I think it is about changing perceptions and not making it a blame game on the men, and trying actively, what are we going to do about this, you know?
Until second wave feminism, women kind of accepted this was okay as well. So women needed a feminist consciousness kind of raising to happen, and I think more men just need that now too.
Yeah.
And there are some amazing men in Ireland for promoting women in music. For example, just because I've been studying the history of Hot Press back to when it first came out in 1977, and Niall Stokes, the editor of Hot Press, he is such a feminist. He has been promoting women in music in Ireland as like, he has been incredible, and he's a very important gatekeeper, of course, in the pop music industry in Ireland. But he's been fantastic. I think he should be commended in a conversation like this.
Definitely.
Just yeah.
Absolutely. Guys, that is so eye-opening for me, for I think everyone here. I think I have never had such like so many women within the industry have given me direct examples of where this happens like day to day, and it really just shows that that it does still happen, that there just are so many barriers. And I really wish you the best of luck with tackling these kinds of things. And I really think you guys are part of a new generation of voices, of female voices speaking to women, and I think you just have so much ahead of you, all of you, and I'm so inspired. I'm gonna like sit down, listen to some music, and be like, wow, women, for the rest of the day. It's the best mood to put me in at 12 o'clock on a Thursday. I think, is it okay if we ask one question from the audience? I know we're going a bit over time, just one, considering I said that we would. So we've got so many. I think I'll ask this one. So how do you think the internet, and with that Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube and the like, has impacted women in music? Has it made it easier or more difficult? And anyone can answer that.
Well, I'll start, just because that's where I started, was uploading to the likes of YouTube and Instagram and stuff. I think anything like that gives you a platform, I think, is going to be great. I think it's just how you choose to use it. So I kind of had to ask myself at the beginning of what I was doing, like, you would notice that a lot of women that would sorry, I want to make sure that I'm wording this properly, but a lot of women that, for example, would show more skin online would tend to get more attention than those who don't. And I'm only specifically talking about from male followers or whatever. So I kind of noticed straight away in my stats that I was always getting more women watching me than men. And I kind of had to ask myself, well, do I want to like almost like, am I going to make more effort putting on more makeup when I'm doing the videos? Am I going to make sure that I'm wearing nicer clothing and stuff like that? And I decided straight off the bat that I'm using my platform to do the absolute opposite of that, and have no problem coming online showing spots. But it's kind of just, I had to ask myself that question. As much as I grew up idolizing the likes of Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera, who were without their own choice, but they were sex icons, I had to ask myself, is that what I want to be showing to the next person that's watching? And no, that's what I decided not. So, I mean, I've just decided that I think it's time that I speak out on behalf of young girls that and guys that want to do music but don't feel like they want to sell their whole self. They just want to release music. They want to let people know who they are as a person, as opposed to being judged by how they look and stuff like that. So I think online platforms are great to get yourself out there, yes, definitely, but I think you'll be respected more by being your absolute self and not trying to do what everybody else is doing, in other words. If I answer that. I feel like I just went around in a little rant there.
I think that's really, really interesting, Amy. I think that I didn't know that about your kind of like philosophy when it comes to music, and I think that I really respect that. I think there's so much power in making those kinds of decisions at the start of your career and then adhering to them for the rest throughout. So I think we're going to have to wrap up there, if that's okay with everyone. Thank you so much, so much for being involved in this panel. I really have just been so inspired. I'm going to make sure I never say artist again when I'm referring to myself. We are all artists if we were involved in music. I'm just so pleased with how it went, and I think everyone who's been watching will enjoy it, and who will watch later will be enjoying your contribution. I'd like to thank absolutely everyone on this panel for coming. Once again, I'm going to send you a massive email with lots of love hearts and smiley faces and love of gratitude to everyone. And yeah, I think everyone's going to have a think about what we've heard today, and I'm probably going to like write in my journal about how women are great. So thank you once again for the last time. Thank you everyone for joining in and listening to these incredible female artists. I would just like to say, please go stream, listen to all of the music of each artist on this panel. I say this like personally as a listener, it's just very, very, very good music, and
add it to your playlist as well.
My playlist.
Follow
playlist. Make Autumn 2020 a playlist with a vibe playlist, and add all of the music, because it aside from it being very good, Irish female artists deserve recognition and to be heard in a way that they haven't before, especially the ones sitting on this panel right now today. So go stream their music, please. And if you're interested in coming to any other Hist events tonight, we've got a murder mystery later on, and I'll be playing Jedward. And I'm very afraid. It's the most ridiculous thing that's ever going to happen. So yeah, if you want to come to that, absolutely do come along. But I won't waste any more time of our wonderful panelists here today. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I really, really, as a listener, I'm just honored to have been able to ask you questions about your careers, and I wish you all the best of luck, getting back to live gigs hopefully, and releasing all the new music. Would anyone just like to mention new music that's upcoming for anyone, just quickly?
I have a single.
Ooh, yeah, wonderful. So fun. So go listen to Feast single when it's out, and also the one that's already out, All I Have. It's wonderful. And yeah, I think that's
Oh, and the Irish Women in Harmony were bringing out a Christmas single. So everybody save it and send it to your grannies.
Absolutely. Get everyone listening to Irish Women in Harmony, and the radio on the Spotify playlist has like all of these female artists. And I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much once again. I'm May Furley, lol, and I'm the ends convener. So if you have any questions about the rest of Freshers Week, you can DM me. If you have any questions about this panel, or you want to know more about their music, you can DM me too, because I promise I know a lot. Done a lot of research, and I also am just a big fan. So yeah, thank you so much. I think we'll end it there. Thank you.
Thanks a million, guys.
Thanks a million.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.